I'm Julia Turner, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest Jimmy Kimmel is Back, sort of, edition. It's Wednesday, September 24th, 2025, and on today's show, we're talking about HBO's new crime drama Task from Mare of Easttown creator Brad Inglesby, set in the same area of Pennsylvania as that hit series. The new show has Mark Ruffalo as a downtrodden FBI agent, Tom Pelphrey as a soulful robber, and a sprawling cast of great actors trying out new ways to say the word water. Then, I hijack the show and force my non-birding co-hosts to watch Listers, a truly indie documentary released for free on YouTube that follows two complete novices chasing one of birding's biggest achievements. Luckily, they're packing sly wit, major charisma, and some killer cinematography skills, and may have made a birding classic. And then, the most important story this week, Disney's decision to suspend Jimmy Kimmel's show indefinitely under pressure from the Trump administration after FCC Chair Brendan Carr objected to remarks Kimmel made in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. We'll discuss why Disney caved, why they're bringing Kimmel back, why some stations won't be having him, and what the blow-up means about the state of free speech in America under Trump. We've got Dana here this week. Welcome, Dana.
Hey, nice to be here.
And sitting in for Steve is Nadira Goffe. Welcome, Nadira.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, let's make a show.
All right, well, as anyone sentient probably knows, life has been a bit crazy lately. It's sometimes hard to unwind. One thing that might help you unwind in a healthy fashion after such a stressful day, Cornbread Hemp's CBD gummies. Cornbread Hemp is a company that makes CBD gummies that are made to help you feel better, whether it's stress, discomfort, or if you just need a little relaxation. Their gummies are formulated to help relieve discomfort, stress, or sleeplessness, depending which kind you get, and all their products are third-party lab-tested and USDA organic to ensure safety and purity. Cornbread was nice enough to send me some samples of their gummies. I got a sleep gummy, which I haven't tried yet, and then I got one that's sort of a daytime focus gummy. You can specifically ask for the effects that you want, so in an attempt to deliver an honest version of my experience, I tried to have the most normal day in every other way that I could, the day that I took it, the normal amount of coffee that I would drink, not an extra stressful schedule, just sort of a regular day of trying to sit at my desk and work. It was an unusually relaxed and focused day, so thank you, Cornbread. Right now, Culture Gabfest listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/culture and use the code CULTURE at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/culture and use the code CULTURE.
Change is always happening. But no matter what changes in 5 years, there's one thing that will stay the same. The price of your internet. With the Xfinity 5-year price guarantee, you get 5 years of the most reliable Wi-Fi with our best equipment included for a price that stays exactly the same. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. Most reliable Wi-Fi based on Open Signal Awards USA. Fixed Broadband Experience Report, August 2024.
All right, let's start with HBO's latest Sunday night special, Task. From Brad Inglesby, the creator who gave us Mare of Easttown, this 7-episode series stars Mark Ruffalo as Tom Brandis, a former Catholic priest turned FBI agent leading a task force in the counties around Philadelphia. He's hunting down an unlikely criminal mastermind, a suburban garbage collector and family man played by Tom Pelphrey, who by night has been pulling off increasingly violent robberies. Both men are weighed down by family obligation and grief. Both men try to do right, sometimes failing and sometimes succeeding. And both men are surrounded by a cast of younger characters whom they must lead and guide despite their own flaws. Before we dive in, let's check out a clip. Here we're going to hear Pelphrey's character Robbie in conversation with his niece Maeve, played by Amelia Jones, who is just 21 but has been raising Robbie's kids since her father, Robbie's brother, died and Robbie's partner skipped town. Here they talk for the first time about the responsibility Maeve has taken on.
I'm miserable.
Okay, well then it's good we're having this conversation. Maeve, what do you want? What is it that you're missing here?
I don't know what I'm missing because I never had anything.
We were in this together.
First my dad dies, then Karen takes off. And I'm here raising our kids. Your kids. I mean, what the fuck do I know about raising kids? I need to make a life for myself.
You want money?
No, it's not
Is that
about
it?
money. It's about not having the weight of the goddamn world on my shoulders. Buy me out. With what? Oh, the money from whatever crazy ass shit you and Cliff are doing out there in the middle of the night?
Maeve,
I don't want to fucking hear it, Robbie. Don't want to hear, don't want to know.
It's not like that. It is different.
I don't want to fucking hear it. It's like my dad. You're my fucking dad. Lie after lie after fucking lie.
Go ahead. We'll be fine without you. We'll certainly fucking eat better.
Fuck you for saying that.
All right, Nadira, as our resident Philadelphian, we'll start with you. What did you make of this show?
Yeah, Task on its face has a lot of things that I love. I was a big fan of Mare of Easttown, so very excited to see Brad Ingelsby's next project. I'm a big fan of noir, which this 100% is in the genre of. Big fan of Jeremiah Zagar, who's an executive producer and sometimes director on the show. He also directed Hustle, the Adam Sandler MBA movie that I thought was great. More importantly, though, side note about him, I'm actually a much bigger fan of his father, Isaiah Zagar, who is a world-renowned mosaic artist and from Philly. Yeah.
Yes, his murals are everywhere in Philly. They're fantastic.
Yeah, they're incredible. So Jeremiah Zagar, very good Nepo baby action going on there.
That's
Philly
a great
Nepo
poll. I did not know about that.
I love that
also...
Big Mural gave him this opportunity. Big Mosaic Mural, the clout.
I wish Big Mural would give us all opportunities, especially Big Philly Mural. I love Big Philly Mural. And I'm also a big fan of Mark Ruffalo doing his sort of classic sad man acting. And I'm also a huge fan of the Delco accent specifically. I love accents that are unapologetic. And I think that one is. And it does sound like home to me, even though the show is, and I will say this, probably the most accurate depiction of the accent that I've seen in any show, they keep getting one very basic, very prominent word wrong, which is a place name, which they keep pronouncing as Lancaster, PA, and it's Lancaster. It's Lancaster, PA. I think anyone from there would be very angry to hear it pronounced that way. But yes, I say all this to say that the show had a lot going for it in terms of my personal interests. And so it's not surprising that I did 100% love it. I watched almost all of it in terms of the screeners that we had and the amount of time. I do think it sort of dips in a few places, but for the most part, I really like the story. I like that it's more of a character study or family drama than it is actually about the crime. And I particularly love the performances of Tom Pelphrey and Amelia Jones. I think that they are both absolutely incredible. And yeah, I think the show has a lot going for it, even if I'm not sure if it will be as buzzy as Mare of Easttown, but I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I am glad that these accents got your seal of approval, and I think we can talk more about them. But Dana, I'm curious what you made of this show.
I mean, I would say if you liked Mare of Easttown, the Kate Winslet, Brad Inglesby series, this would definitely be in that. It's a brother series to it, almost literally. Like I feel like the universes overlap in small ways, and it feels very of a piece with the mood. I don't think that it's as well plotted on the crime level, and I wonder if both of you and you, Nadira, as a noir fan, agree with me that the detective angle of the show is not as strong as the character angle. And I think Brad Inglesby would own up to that. He thinks of himself as a character writer and not really a weaver of crime fiction webs. But I found myself both not following completely and not totally caring about all the intricacies of how they scope the houses, what the biker gang drug smuggling ring has to do with Tom Pelphrey's character's household ups. All of that just felt a little bit like narrative that had to be gotten through so that we could get moments like the one we hear in that clip, the family moments with both of these two men's families. But that said, the writing scene by scene of especially those family scenes is so phenomenal. And the acting across the board is spectacular. Like, everybody really, really brings it. I was completely amazed to hear, if you watch the making of little clips that HBO puts after each episode, which I always do watch. I love a making of featurette. Half the actors are British. They're English, Irish. They have these crazy accents, and they're all coming with a completely solid, not just American, but regional American accent. So, a part of me was just in awe of, whatever accent training those British teachers are putting their students through.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. After the third episode, the making of. For whatever reason, that was the first one of the making of thingies that I watched. And the it is like the best piece of unintentional found comedy that I have experienced in the last like 5 years. Like, so, first we hear Mark Ruffalo talking about the show. Great. We know how Mark Ruffalo sounds. Then there's this kind of like, you know, slickster cop who's like one of the junior cops on Ruffalo's team, played by an actor named Fabian Frankel, who suddenly shows up with this posh. He's like, "Well, my thought about my character is blah 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 blah," and you're like, "Oh wow, good job, good job talking about your local."
I did know because he is in the Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon, whichever. But yeah, so that one wasn't as much of a surprise, but the sheer number.
Just like, so, okay, you're like, okay, he comes. And then like the kind of fuck up detective girl that he's befriending speaks next, and she's got like a trilling little Irish brogue and talking about blah, blah, blah. And then the next actor comes and they have like a mildly Caribbean flavor to their accent. And then the next actor comes and they've got like literally no one besides Mark Ruffalo seems to speak with like an American accent as a baseline. And then they're just bending their vowels. Delco word. I find myself getting pulled into this show because of the strength of the acting and the depth of the characterization. But I will say it's like it has a bleak magnetism. Like I found myself not wanting to put on the first episode, and then sort of like dreading watching it because there's like missing kids and grieving people, and like it's a little slow and it's a lot dark. It's just heavy. The material is very heavy. They're all shouldering tasks, and at first it feels a little bit tasky to watch it, but now that I've watched the first several, I'm like, what's going to happen to them? Like it balances in its heaviness the kind of compelling vividness that makes me feel like it's a real universe that I want to know what's going to happen to these people. I mean, and it feels sort of clear what's going to happen to them, but I'm sure it's not actually. So initially watching it, I thought, I don't know. This doesn't seem as good as Mare of Easttown. And then the more I'm watching it, I'm thinking, I think I would send people to check this out. Like it just is absorbing, and it takes its humans very seriously in a way that feels good.
I 100% agree, especially about the last part about taking its people seriously. Roxana Haddadi wrote a review of the show for Vulture, which is, they did not love the show that much, but one thing that they pointed out that they did really love is how much space and time the show gives to teens and kids and their moments. And more specifically, I'd like to add to that, which I agree with, it not only lets them take up space, but it lets them be smart. And it lets them have really smart conversations and observations. And I think that that's also something new, or not necessarily new, but rare to see on a show that's about adults and their issues, to very clearly take seriously the effects that they have on children and just how smart and perceptive children are. And that's something that has sort of stuck with me as I've continued watching the show.
That's a good point. And it's something that detective shows that involve things like missing children, right? Or kidnapping, or, things where kids are in danger can often feel exploitive, right? Like the kid is just bait to make you care about this character's dilemma. And this show really sidesteps that. Something else I wanted to remark on what Julia was saying about the darkness of the show. Sam Adams wrote this in his review on Slate of Task, is that it really makes sense that this is in the classic HBO Sunday night format of just dropping week by week. And it's not really a show to binge. We sort of had to binge it for this segment, and it really does feel quite heavy and like I'm wading through, thick mud right here. But the idea of taking time to breathe in between each week and really, like you say, Julia, wanting to know what happens next to this community, it seems like the right way to watch it.
All right. Well, the show is Task. It is on HBO. It is dropping week by week in the old-fashioned manner. And I think if you want to know who you will be watching on television and other screens for the next 10 years, alone is a reason to check it out. There are just so many great performances in it. So it's Task from Brad Inglesby on HBO.
You know, everyone can use a little help in shaping the direction of their lives, from fitness routines to mental resilience, or navigating personal goals, or tackling burnout. And that's what the Life Kit podcast from NPR is here to do. If you're looking to move with more intention, or just need thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. Life Kit offers real stories, relevant insights, and clear takeaways to help you meet those large and small decision-making moments with confidence and clarity. Life Kit's trusted voices and expert advice can help take you to the next step, however big or small. Listen to Life Kit to hear thoughtful conversations that unpack the emotional and practical side of wellness. Get help tackling common issues like relationships, finances, parenting, or your career. Then walk away with a game plan you can implement right away. Life Kit isn't just another podcast about self-improvement. It's about understanding how to live a little better, starting now. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR. Now is the moment in our show where we talk about business. All we have to tell you about this week is our bonus episode, which will be available only to Slate Plus subscribers separately in your feed. This week, we're talking about children's picture books. Dan Coyce, beloved friend of the program, just made, along with Rebecca Onion, another of our longtime favorite co-hosts, a list of the 25 best children's books of the last 25 years. They spent a really long time putting this together. It's a big package that isn't just a choice of the books and a little description of each and the art from them, but interviews with some of the creators and, related links. It's a really wonderful package, whether or not you have kids. It really gives you a sense of where that part of the publishing industry has been going this century. And if you're not a Slate Plus subscriber, please consider becoming one. When you're a Slate Plus subscriber, you get so many benefits, including ad-free versions of our podcasts, bonus episodes for many of the podcasts every week, like the one I just described, and of course, the opportunity to read as much as you like on slate.com. That's also an opportunity to support Slate and support our show. To sign up for Slate Plus and get those benefits, go to slate.com/cultureplus. If you do sign up through that page, you give us a little boost as the people who wooed you over. So once again, that's slate.com/cultureplus. Okay, back to the show.
Next up, the documentary I forced on my co-hosts, Listers. This indie film follows two charismatic novice birders, brothers Owen and Quentin Reiser, who decide to attempt a big year trying to identify the most bird species in the lower 48 states, all while living out of a van. What may sound like a recipe for tedium turns into something genuinely captivating thanks to the brothers' enthusiasm and sincerity and their surprisingly extraordinary cinematography skills. I did not want to go into this surprise birding conversation solo. So joining us for this segment will be Forrest Wickman, who you may know as Slate's culture editor, but who true heads know as Slate's birder-in-chief. Welcome, Forrest.
Hello, hello. Yes, I too have the disease.
Thank you for being dragooned onto this segment of our show. All right, before we dive in, let's listen to a clip of these brothers explaining what they are up to and what large birding goal they have set for themselves.
So, we decided we'd try the most extreme form of birdwatching. Because
that's a great way to learn about something, is to try to just do it at the highest level,
A big year in birding is seeing as many species as you can in one calendar year, January 1st to December 31st.
The modifier is, where? So you could have a world big year, you could have an ABA area big year, you could have a lower 48 big year.
Someone did a naked big year, I don't know, where they only counted birds that they saw while they were naked.
I'm from northern Wisconsin, so I got myself pretty used to being naked in cold weather for a while. I think I do better birding. I know I get closer to wildlife for some reason. I feel like I'm one with nature when I'm walking in the woods.
I feel like the lower 48, sort of ABA, is the money of how many birds you can see in a year.
For the lower 48, the number to beat is 751.
Typical experience level of somebody who does a big year is usually way beyond your guys' level.
I love the understatement in that final remark. The typical level of birding of someone who does a big year is usually someone who knows how to bird and cares about birding and has not just begun to bird for a documentary stunt. I'm going to start here with our film critic, Dana Stevens. Dana, we've made you watch basically an unreleased film. What'd you make of it?
Well, for one thing, this is one of my favorite movies I've seen so far this year. It is so good. And I think part of what I love about it is, I mean, not just the release strategy that it's this, thing released on YouTube by essentially two amateur filmmakers, but the movies that it reminded me of while watching, before I get to the whole bird bit, just as a kind of cinematic template, were American Movie, the documentary from back in the early 2000s, right? Which similarly is sort of about two creative dirtbags on the road together trying to accomplish an insane project that they're not qualified to do. In the case of that film, it's making a movie. And then a movie we saw earlier this year and talked about on the show that, Julia, I think you weren't on this week, but Secret Mall Apartment, which was this documentary about a guy who builds an apartment in a sort of, hidden crawl space in a mall, which similarly to this movie is just a very guerrilla filmmaking sort of amateur experiment about young people without a lot of resources doing weird things and telling the story of it. And I loved both of those docs. This has a bit of a similar feeling. What I really loved about this documentary, I think, is that when they did set out on the road trip that we hear just the beginning of, they really didn't know what was going to happen. And they do start out, like you say, Julia, just in the mode of, let's do a crazy stunt. Let's break a record. Even at the beginning, I thought, I'm not going to love this movie because it's going to be all about record breaking and not about, the love of the birds. But to watch them fall in love with the hobby as they're in the midst of doing this, utterly impossible stunt was part of what I loved about it. And I don't want anyone to reveal the ending. There's a sort of philosophical twist to the ending that's just so beautiful. And the brothers are hilarious. I mean, these two guys just interact so naturally. They're kind of, riffing on whatever's going on. And as you mentioned, Julia, there's this kind of surprise treat, which is that one of the two brothers is a professional nature videographer, which I actually think they could have been a bit more upfront about that at the beginning. They aren't just like two guys with a camera, right? One of them has had videos on the National Geographic site. I don't think that he's specialized in birds, obviously. He doesn't know anything about them, but we'll switch between this very lo-fi footage of the two of them, basically eating tuna out of cans in a van, and then suddenly utterly gorgeous bird footage, which is extremely creative, I thought, as birders. You, Julia and Forrest can tell us more, but I thought it was very creative how the birds were filmed. It wasn't just sort of like, there's the owl we've been looking for sitting on a branch. The birds were often like behaving in some interesting way, or you'd see them eating, or you'd see them with their young, or kind of grooming each other or whatever. I just really felt like they were actually observing bird behavior in the wild, and I love that bit too. So yes, listers, I'm all on board.
All right. Yay. We're not going to get tossed out of the recording studio here. All right, Forrest, you are a birder and have been for some time now. Did you think this film captured the birding experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could speak to kind of both the filmmaking aspects here, which Dana started to get to, but I guess I'm here to speak to the birding aspects.
We'll take insights on both.
Like one thing, and Dana, you already sort of, you alluded to the way that there's two different styles of filmmaking here, and they use those extremely well to depict both the kind of lowest lows of birding, which is like you're at a dumpster trying to point out that this particular rare bird is like to the right of the volleyball and to the left of the styrofoam cup. And it's not quite, nature is one thing you learn as a birder is that nature is all over the country. It's not just quote unquote, like out in the wilderness. It's in your yard. It's at your garbage dump. And so there's that aspect to it. And then they simultaneously use that super high def footage to show the highest highs. And, there have been other movies about birding before. The most high profile one was The Big Year, which is a sort of big studio comedy back when they still made those, that Steve Martin and Jack Black and Owen Wilson made about their an actual big year attempt that a few birders had done a few years before that. And usually the footage of the birds is not very good, which has the effect of making birders look very silly. And birders are very silly, and big year birders are especially silly. But when you see how beautiful some of these birds can look when you're really looking like through a nice pair of binoculars or something, or just a decent pair, then it's like, oh, they're being silly, but I kind of get why they're doing it. I get why they're staring, at that dumpster And that bird to the right of the volleyball is beautiful. But I don't know. We haven't heard from Nadira. Perhaps she hated it, and then I'll be run out of here for even suggesting that this ever as a topic.
No. I was nervous at first, I will admit, because if there's certain things I don't care about, the biggest one in terms of film has to be any documentary that has the word extreme in it. Like, I just don't care about people going out and doing things to an extreme level. And I also don't necessarily find myself that attuned to caring about, like, what white men do when they're just, necessarily, I guess, alone by themselves. But what I do love are stories about road trips and stories that are in-depth looks at the sort of internal politics of particular social groups. It's a part of why I love, like organized crime stories and stuff. And this was so good. And they are so funny. These brothers are so funny, and they're so effervescent on camera. And I think they're very honest look at this world of birding, showing the highs and the lows of the act, but also how serious and how unserious the people who do it are, was really refreshing. And I loved watching them experience all of these different things, trials, tribulations, but also successes, and getting more excited as it goes along. And also in terms of filmmaking, not only is it funny, but I actually found the craft of the movie to be so fun. There's little animations throughout that are so captivating and heartwarming and smart. It gives a sort of homemade feel to what is obviously a homemade project, but instead of trying to make a super polished thing, they just went for the aesthetic or the vibe of, what birding kind of is and what their trip was. And I loved the way that they packaged it all, and the way that it really got into some of the politics or serious things about birding, whether it's conversations about climate and ecology or the racial politics of changing the bird names. And, there's a segment in this movie where they're trying to protect a nest of killdeer. And it's such not to spoil it, but it ends kind of heartbreakingly, but it's such an honest depiction of where we are in terms of climate and what we as a society care about, and what the mission of birders can be or is sometimes, and like why they're doing it, if not just for the competition or whatever. And so I don't know, I really loved this. I didn't think I was going to like it at all, but they absolutely 100% convinced me.
Yeah, it really has a lot going for it. They are very charming. You spend a lot more time with Quentin, who's like a stoner poet and really enjoys pontificating to the camera. And although that sentence might make you think he would be insufferable, actually is not. And then more recessive is Owen Reiser, who I think is the brother that's got the history of doing some cinematography. But it's, again, seems pretty early in his career. He's got credits as like a camera technician. He's got credits on a couple different series, but it's not like I had a similar uncertainty, Dana, about whether maybe they should have been a little more upfront of like, and we have this really cool ability to take dope shots of birds, so we thought it might be neat to like try to find like, it's a little sneaky how the bird footage emerges because you're following them in dirtbag mode. The camera aesthetic of their lives is almost intentionally grungy. They kind of lean into the grunge of it. And when you first start to see these shots of birds, they're so startling and gorgeous that you're like, wait, what is this footage? Like, is this footage the footage they got? Like, they're not quite clear that they got it immediately. And you're like, is this stock footage? And also, knowing a little bit about birding as I do, they were seeing some like unusual birds right away, and birds that are not totally, like birds that I've never seen in my life, or like among the first 30 birds you see. And you're like, did they, at first, if you're watching it as a birder, you're like, wait, did they ever get birding? Like, why are they showing me these rare birds like right off the jump when they're describing what idiots they are? On the other hand, you kind of can sometimes see something crazy just when you start paying attention. And then slowly you begin to realize like, no, this is what they shot. And it's the thing that makes it work so beautifully. I think you're exactly right, Forrest. Like the way that previous birding depictions have shown what birding is, it seems like people running around on a beach, like holding up a specific grain of sand and being like, look, I found a little yellow one, and it's like, what the hell? These people are lunatics. And it almost reminded me of like the Pulp Fiction scene, right, where the briefcase glows, and it's like, what's in the briefcase? Like this film manages to like show you what's in the briefcase, and it's resplendent. Like these shots are incredible, and suddenly you're like, oh, I see why you could get kind of addicted to this.
I think the thing that's so interesting about birding and about this movie, but perhaps about birding in general, is that almost everything that they say or do can in some way be applied as a metaphor for life. Like it just carries it. Everything that they say or do carries this sort of gravitas where you're like, oh, wow, that's a really cool sentiment. And doesn't this also in some way apply to life more generally?
Yes, Nadira, this is what I mean about the philosophical scope of the movie in the end, that it starts off as this funny stunt about two brothers that I sort of thought this will be mildly amusing with maybe some pretty nature shots. And then I ended up feeling really different about not just birds, but about kind of being in nature. There's something that one of the birders that they interview and also at one point go birding with says that's really wonderful, which is basically that everyone's a birder and they just don't know it yet. That anybody who's looked at a bird feeder and said like, oh, there's a male cardinal and a female cardinal, like I'm at that level of bird identification. Like I do sometimes when I'll see an interesting bird, go to the Cornell Ornithology bird finder site and look up what it is. But I'm not enough of a morning person to get out there with binoculars.
Noticing is very much what birding is. You are a birder, Dana, from your self-description. Congratulations. You found the best hobby.
My list is like 5 birds long.
The documentary reminds me of many things. Of like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Like it's kind of a great road movie, and it becomes sort of about the story of like two stoners. At least one of them is definitely a stoner. I think they both are, who are just like traveling the country and kind of learning what America is really like now, and just like noticing all sorts of hilarious stuff that often you only like, you go out birding, maybe you're looking for a rare bird, but you always notice other strange stuff, and it's only sometimes the birds. Sometimes it's just like unusual human behavior, and there's a lot of kind of like How To with John Wilson, that great HBO series, in this documentary as well, where they're just like noticing hilarious weird stuff that people are doing.
And we want to thank our listener, Mercy Davison from Normal, Illinois, who is a listener to this show and wrote in a couple months ago being like, you guys should really check out this film. And I think that's part of why it has been on our radar and was on Forest radar. And then Slate assigned a piece about it to Nick Lund, a great birding writer. And anyway, when we went to do our research to figure out who else had written about it, like, not that many people have yet. But Dana says this is an American classic in the league of American movies. So everybody get listing. All right, it's listers on YouTube. It's free and you have no excuse.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. So I went to Saks.com for an accessory that I'm always in the mood to shop for, sunglasses. I love stylish sunglasses, particularly the classic kind of Jackie O-shaped, the big, like slightly oval, dark glasses. And it's a little luxury that, I can afford even when I'm trying not to shop. So I looked at some of the sunglasses on offer at Saks, and they've got all kinds of shapes, not only my favorite Jackie O's, but all kinds of fun cat eye shapes and different designer sunglasses. And just looking at them has been an inspiration for what sunglasses to pair with what outfits. But that's just my experience with Saks.com. There's so much more to explore based on your personal style and what you're looking for. So this fall, whether you're trying out the latest fashion trends or curating a closet that stands the test of time, Saks has you covered. If you want shopping to be fun and easy, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day.
All right, now let's turn to Jimmy Kimmel. Last week, the late night host became the bellwether for the fate of free speech in this country after Disney yanked his show off the air indefinitely in the wake of comments he made about the response to the assassination of Charlie Kirk in his monologue. Let's pause here just to listen to what he said, because I think it's important to have that audio as context for everything that followed.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism.
After making these remarks and other remarks about his revulsion at political assassination, his sympathy for Charlie Kirk's family, and any number of other generally sane things to say in the wake of a horrific act of political violence, Disney, facing pressure from the Trump administration and from FCC Chair Brendan Carr, made the shocking decision to suspend Kimmel and pull Jimmy Kimmel Live from the air, quote, indefinitely. Then on Monday this week, Disney announced that they'd reached a resolution with Kimmel and that he would return to the airwaves starting Tuesday night of this week. We are taping Tuesday day. You are listening Wednesday or later, so you know what Kimmel and Disney negotiated for him to say in his monologue, and we do not yet. We will look forward to hearing what he has decided to / negotiated his ability to say. And in the meantime, two local affiliate station groups, the Sinclair and Nexstar stations, have announced that they will not be airing Jimmy Kimmel, even though Disney is returning him to their airwaves, which is fairly unprecedented in the history of how local affiliates respond to what their, corporate stations tend to give them. So we're headed for an unusual game of chicken ahead as we see how the Disney Corporation balances these tensions. We really wanted to take a moment on this week's show to talk about this conflict just because somehow we have found ourselves at a moment where late night television comedy is a central front in the Trump administration's approach to changing the norms of American life. And I think we can start by sharing our responses to the broader conflict, and then maybe we can look a little bit about what this latest news suggests for what's ahead. Dana, I'm curious for your perspective here. What did you make of the suspension of Kimmel and of his reinstatement?
I mean, there's so many moving parts, like whirling parts here, that it's changing so fast that it's hard to know where to start trying to talk about it. But one thing I was thinking of is, that when Colbert's show was canceled, or at least announced that it will not, go forth after this season, we talked about it on the show. And so then the question would be, are we returning to the same territory? But like I say, the territory is changing so quickly that I think this is a obviously related but different and more alarming story. And that the First Amendment rights that are being infringed here are more flagrantly obvious, right? If only because there is actual documented pressure from the government, from the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, on ABC and affiliates to shut the show down. So it's not just a question of the ownership of the station deciding to capitulate in advance, as we're now always saying about the Trump administration, but it's textbook First Amendment violation, right? And that seems far more worrisome. Another element that's different, as you just mentioned, Julia, is the fact that even though he is being brought back, he's not being brought back universally. And given how important Sinclair and Nexstar are as local affiliates in the nation, like I believe one of them controls about 40 markets, right? Which means sort of urban areas, I would imagine, more than just one city, but the city and surroundings. The other controls about 30 markets. So between the two of them, that's like 70 U.S. cities that will not, maybe, I'm not sure if I'm getting the exact geography right here, but like large portions of the U.S. TV viewing public will not be able to see the show now. So that's something new as well, that there's this balkanization, right, between political sides among television markets. And that's a very scary thing for the future of the news industry and media in general as well.
Yeah, the prospect of like a truly culturally balkanized America where different people have different access to different shows. I mean, obviously, in many ways, we are already on our way pretty far down that path in terms of the different media ecosystems that people of different political persuasions find themselves within. I do think that the local affiliate groups do not track onto those psychographic or political divisions neatly. Like if you look at the list of areas that Sinclair and Nexstar cover, it's Washington, D.C., it's Seattle, Tacoma, it's St. Louis, Columbus, Ohio, Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina. The Nexstar group has Nashville, Salt Lake City, Hartford and New Haven, Harrisburg, PA, New Orleans, Albany. These are not kind of cities full of people who all don't want to see Jimmy Kimmel. And I think it will be really interesting to watch what kind of pressure those local affiliates groups face. Like my main experience in, editing and cultural reporting of dealing with various outages in local stations is usually when there's some kind of behind the scenes fight about whether the sports games of the local team are going to appear on the whatever the thing is that people use to watch them, and local people get mad when they can't see their thing. And so it's one thing for there to not be any Jimmy Kimmel for anyone to see in a world where there is Jimmy Kimmel and your neighbors or your cousins can watch it, but you can't because of the city you live in. There's a world where perhaps people in some of those places agitate, but that also raises the question of whether anybody wants to watch a particular late night host as much as they want to watch their favorite sports team. Like the fact that late night television is the front for some of these battles is tricky because it's not the most vital format, and it creates interesting tensions, I think, in how the battle will play out. Nadira, what have you been making of this conflict, and where do you think it's headed next?
I'm so tired of living in somewhat unprecedented times. I will say that much. Like, I'm so tired of reading headlines and being like, well, I guess that's a thing that we have to deal with now. And I do think a part of what we've sort of been talking around or mentioning in some part, but not fully, are the incentives and the sort of hidden meanings and talks behind this. For example, I don't love that we have an FCC chairman who helped write Project 2025, and I specifically don't love that Nexstar, one of the larger owners of these affiliate stations, is trying to close a about $6 billion merger with another company in a deal that would need FCC approval. And so, there's an incentive for them to do whatever Brendan Carr wants. And I don't necessarily love that hang up of it because it all becomes even more insidious. In addition to violating First Amendment rights, it's just kind of like, wow, okay, so these are also business politics that we have to think about in terms of business politics that just don't have our best interests at heart or in favor. And so I don't love that. But I do find this interesting in terms of impact because of the exact reasons that Julia has already laid out. In terms of my experience, I haven't watched Kimmel live in years. I've watched plenty of clips that have surfaced online or social media later, but I am sort of wondering what sort of realistic impact this will have in the moment compared to a sort of follow-up backlash when things hit social media, and how this is going to necessarily break down in terms of location or who watches Kimmel on what service or device. And so it is very hard to tell how this is going to move, but I do find it, everything these days just feels dystopian in new and increasingly stronger ways. And I do think the general idea that, like Julia was saying, that I could watch something, but maybe some friends back home or somewhere else could not, just because of where we are, is startling just in principle. like even if I don't necessarily need to watch a full hour or whatever of Kimmel, like the principle of it, I think, is really terrifying and startling. And I think that is what most people are reacting to. And it's hard because how do you defend a principle? Like, how do you defend the principle of the thing when you can't even defend the Constitution? And I find that concern to be really engaging and scary, but also really important to figure out.
I mean, just to shine a tiny light in the dystopian landscape that you just accurately described, there was a kind of a sense of triumph yesterday when it was announced that Kimmel was coming back. You know, I think I wasn't the only person. I know I was not the only person who canceled my Disney Plus subscription, you know, and put in the little box where you say why you're quitting. Well, because you took away Jimmy Kimmel's First Amendment rights and you're buckling to authoritarianism or whatever. And I'm sure that pushback was a part of it. You know, we'll never know what. Of course, Disney will never accurately present what happened in their behind the scenes talks, but it had to be some fear for their bottom line and their stocks crashing and people giving up their subscriptions. And so the idea that there could be, you know, some sort of consumer resistance at some level to this and it could work quickly was a heartening aspect of the whole developing story.
I do want to highlight, I feel like there have been some folks who've made some like false equivalency arguments in the wake of this of like, well, the left was so excited to cancel people who had inappropriate speech or make sure Gina Carano's career ended and they should have watched out for what was coming. Like I've really heard more people I thought of as smart point in that direction than I expected in the wake of this. And I think it is true. It's interesting to see 450 celebrities and creative people in alliance with the ACLU issuing a public statement excoriating Disney for its cowardly decision. The ACLU and the kind of abstract first principle adherence to the idea that what America is about is anybody can say anything they want that is not a direct incitement to violence is a principle that has grown more attenuated or that people on the left have had more complex feelings about. And I think there's plenty of ways to think about that. But this does not strike me as the appropriate moment to raise that. Like what's happening here is not an organic consumer response of Americans being outraged by the thing that Jimmy Kimmel said and being so mad that Disney had to do something about it. What happened was an incident of like government strong-arming and threat where they objected to Kimmel's speech and then used public forums to threaten, inappropriate government consequences for the speech of someone working for a major company. And that is just like very different than whatever may be illiberal about a consumer response to saying, well, we don't want to watch Roseanne's show anymore, given what she's said or done. And I think it's really important to draw that distinction. And I also think it'll be interesting to see if this moment pushes the speech conversation back toward a more absolutist position of like, we actually do have to fight for everybody's right to say even the craziest things, because we're beginning to see what happens when those rights get stepped on. But I will also say, I think part of the dynamic here is like the Kimmelness of it. Like I was talking to some friends this weekend who were like, I guess Kimmel is Che Guevara now. Like Kimmel is not, Kimmel is Kimmel. He is the most middle of the road. He is the most affable, sort of centrist. I mean, there's been reporting in the wake of this that he did insist on continuing to make political points in his monologue, and which is not necessarily what his ABC or Disney bosses most hoped for. And I think they probably wished he were even more middle of the road and more anodyne. But he's the Oscar host nobody really objects to. He had, he didn't come into late night hosting out of acerbic leftist Comedy Central comedy. He came out of like bro-y doofiness, like he's not, I think you could watch Colbert and Seth Meyers and feel like those guys, I mean, they're both men I admire, but like they sort of feel like coastal elites doing late night, and Jimmy Kimmel feels like an old-fashioned just like entertainer dude, like he has a different vibe, which I think is part of why they're coming for Colbert had one valence, and like they're coming for fucking Jimmy Kimmel.
A part of me wondered if it was maybe also a reaction to audience size. I know nothing about the numbers of late night, but I would assume that the middle of the road guy probably has more viewers than the coastal elites, which I think is a great way of trying to describe them. And so maybe it's a reaction to potential audience size, but I was balking at the idea of like, this is the man that we're scared of.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that actually Colbert had been the highest rated of the shows even prior to his cancellation. Yeah,
that just makes this whole thing even more bonkers and unbelievable.
I think it'll be interesting to watch in the coming weeks how this battle with the local affiliates plays out. I feel like whenever news begins to turn on a battle with the local affiliates, everyone has to remember how linear television works. And they get confused. But I think the fact that these companies have their own political motivations in terms of what they're trying to get approved, or their own political inclinations in the case of Sinclair, but they also serve large communities that probably will have diverse desires in terms of what happens with Kimmel, will mean that the pressure is actually going to turn to them. And they will have to be balancing currying favor with the administration and listening to what their communities want from them. And that will be interesting to watch. I imagine this may not be the last time we discuss this issue. But in the meantime, put Jimmy Kimmel's face on a t-shirt, and I at least feel grateful for the degree to which people rallied in shock and horror at this overstep. It suggests that people can rally in shock and horror, which is a good thing to know.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, now is the moment in our show when we endorse. Nadira, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, before my actual endorsement, I want to throw a very, very quick mention to an endorsement that our producer, Ben Frisch, made me aware of moments before we taped, which is Fat Bear Week. It's basically just a week where they monitor the pounds that the bears put on hibernation.
Explore.org. I already voted.
Which I thought was really cute. But for my main endorsement, I want to shout out the multi-instrumentalist and singer-songwriter Kia. That's Keiyaa. She's based out of Brooklyn. Her debut album, which she released in 2020, called Forever Your Girl, sort of altered my brain chemistry. It was just one of the most honest albums about the sort of range of emotions of being a Black woman that I have ever heard. And now she's back. She released a single a month or so ago called Stupid Prizes. And then a few days ago, she released a second single called Take It. And these are both from her upcoming album, Hooke's Law, which takes its title from the rule of physics that states that the extension or compression of an elastic object like a spring is directly proportional to the force applied to it. The singles are stunning, and I can't wait for the full album, Hooke's Law, which is out on Halloween, so everyone should check it out and support me.
Dana, what have you got?
Well, guys, I was struggling over whether to endorse this week because it's something that is right now not available in the United States. I think, as far as I can tell, almost all the United States. But then I went to the website and scrolled through, and you can right now watch this film that I'm about to endorse in all over the UK, all over the world, really. Lots of showings in France. It's going to be showing in China and the Czech Republic and all kinds of other places. So, and Sweden. So because we have listeners all around the world, and because hopefully at some point some smart distributor will bring it to the US, I'm going to endorse the new 4K re-release of Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, which I saw this weekend on the big screen. And I am not endorsing you going and watching it on your TV. In fact, I'm forbidding you, listener, if you have never seen Barry Lyndon, from going and watching it, even on the best TV, because, well, here's the story, actually, Julia, that you'll identify with, because I know that you sometimes save works of art, right? There's like books by some of your favorite authors that you're still saving so that you won't have read everything.
Still haven't read To the Lighthouse. I'm risking being hit by a bus every day that I don't read it. But
that was the book I was trying to remember. I knew that it was a woman, a female modernist author classic that you had not read. So maybe my To the Lighthouse has been Barry Lyndon for years and years. And in part, that's just because I knew that it's this sumptuous pictorial feast and it's all about the visuals. And as it turns out, it's about a lot more than that. But it is sort of famously, this fantastic looking movie that has this very innovative lighting technique where, whole scenes are shot by this kind of dreamy candlelight. The entire thing looks like a series of paintings. And so I had been putting it off until I could see it in the best format possible, not just on the big screen, but, if possible, on 35 millimeter. And now there's this 4K restoration. So finally that day rolled around last weekend, and this played at the Paris Theater in New York, I think for just 2 showings. And I caught it, and it was just one of the most satisfying cinematic experiences I've had in years and years and years. I mean, part of it was because of the gorgeousness of the movie, but part of it was honestly because of the wait. Like, I'm finally going to experience this thing. And Barry Lyndon is a movie that, if you trace its history, its critical history, kind of reception history, there was a period that it was sort of considered, I don't know, like beautiful but shallow, vacuous. The idea was sort of like, well, Stanley Kubrick got all this money and all this power after 2001, and I believe Clockwork Orange had already been made at that point. He was sort of at this moment that he could marshal the resources to make any movie, and he decided to take a Thackeray novel, a Thackeray novel about sort of 19th century, 18th century dueling culture, and turn it into this 3-hour epic that's super visually beautiful. And at the time, I think that was kind of regarded as a snooze fest choice. The movie was not commercially successful and was not that critically successful for many years. But in the last few decades, it's again been picked up and is now, I think, championed as one of his great works. Anyway, all of that history went into my seeing it too. So I went in sort of thinking, well, maybe this will be sort of a slog, but it'll look nice. And it turns out it's a fantastic movie. Like, the score is unbelievable. I've been listening to the soundtrack ever since. It kind of uses all this great Baroque classical music in this very Kubrickian kind of ironic, powerful way. And then just the story that it tells, the kind of scope of the social satire that it's taking on, and, the misery, the sumptuous misery of the world that it presents is just really unique. So now I'm a huge Barry Lyndon stan, and I'm sorry to be endorsing something that maybe not most, but many of our listeners will be saying, well, thanks for telling me I can't do something. But I guess
they're
in a way,
going to be flocking to the theaters in Sweden, Dana.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what I'm really endorsing in a way is like, have your Virginia Woolf novel that you haven't read or your Barry Lyndon that you haven't seen, and then just treat yourself to it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love the concept of a cultural grail. Like, in fashion, a grail is a sort of like difficult to find or highly coveted, high value designer piece of clothing or sneaker or something. And I love the idea of having your own cultural grail. Like, that's such a sweet concept, and it makes me realize that I have many. But yeah, I love that. I'm gonna fly to Sweden.
I want to have an observation and then an endorsement. So I feel like we have arrived at a moment where there is this real divide in the people I'm talking to between AI avoidance and AI dabblers. Like, I feel like there are a lot of people who are just like, I hate this. I don't know why it's happening. It seems stupid. No one asked for this. Why is everybody driving the society off a cliff? La 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 la. I don't want to deal with AI. And then I feel like, which is a camp that I would have put myself in for a while. And then I feel like there are people who understand the risks, fears, environmental impacts, potential costs, and alarm, and then feel kind of an urge to like play with it and understand it, to sort of have a sense of why it's so appealing to the third camp, who I'm also spending some time with, I guess, which is people who just like ask ChatGPT to solve all their problems and rely on its answers completely unthinkingly, which is a group of people that exists. But I have moved from Camp A into Camp B, which is like warily dabbling and trying to understand what its potentiality is, and I'm finding it interesting. And in that vein, came across an essay that Megan O'Rourke, former Slate editor, longtime friend of the program, I'm sure we've had her on as a guest at some point, although maybe not for a while. But back in July, she wrote an essay for the New York Times Opinion that I think is one of the best pieces about kind of the experience of dabbling with AI as an AI skeptic that I have yet read. The essay is called "I Teach Creative Writing. This is what AI is doing to students." And it is true that she touches on that theme, but she also describes her own reservations about AI, experiments with AI, coming to rely on AI for a while, then coming to be sort of horrified by that reliance. And I remember once when, maybe 25 years ago, when Megan and I were colleagues, and we had a new email system imposed upon us that was terrible and janky. And she wrote, with her poet's precision, a like 48-point bulleted list of exactly why this program was completely unfeasible and was ruining everything. And like seeing her apply her abilities of precision and expression about something so mundane in that case was sort of hilariously powerful and funny. But in this case, it's like it requires the poet's precision and imagination to examine the uncanniness of playing with these tools and what they can do and what they can't do. And I just think she's written something absolutely brilliant. So it's an essay by Megan O'Rourke from July called "I Teach Creative Writing. This is what AI is doing to students," but it is much, much more than that.
Also, I am going to London like mid-October to late October, and I just checked, and there is a screening in London of Barry Lyndon on October 15th. So
I saw that. It's at the Prince Charles Cinema, which is a great place to see movies, right in the middle of Soho. Yes, definitely go see it.
All right. You'll find links to some of the things we talked about today on our show page. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. Our introductory theme music is by the composer Nicholas Bertel. Our producer today is Benjamin Frisch. Our PA is Daniel Hirsch. For Dana Stevens and Nadira Goffe, I'm Julia Turner. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. So I went to Saks.com for an accessory that I'm always in the mood to shop for: sunglasses. I love stylish sunglasses, particularly the classic kind of Jackie O-shaped, the big, like slightly oval, dark glasses. And it's a little luxury that, I can afford even when I'm trying not to shop. So I looked at some of the sunglasses on offer at Saks, and they've got all kinds of shapes, not only my favorite Jackie O's, but all kinds of fun cat eye shapes and different designer sunglasses. And just looking at them has been an inspiration for what sunglasses to pair with what outfits. But that's just my experience with Saks.com. There's so much more to explore based on your personal style and what you're looking for. So this fall, whether you're trying out the latest fashion trends or curating a closet that stands the test of time, Saks has you covered. If you want shopping to be fun and easy, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.